Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I never planned on starting a war, but when a shady HOA tried to claim my land with forged maps, fake fines, and flying drones, they picked the wrong ex-federal agent. This is the story of how I turned a quiet farm into the front line of a bureaucratic rebellion. I never thought I'd end up back in North Carolina, let alone owning a 60-acre farm that smelled like hay, diesel, and mild regret. But after 20 years in federal service, most of them spent auditing the financial intestines of some very expensive HOA boards, I'd had enough. I turned in my badge at the IRS, packed up what was left of my patience, and bought the kind of land that screams isolation, fields, an overgrown pasture, a half-collapsed barn, and a pond that looked like it hadn't seen a fish since the bush. Administration. The listing called it a rustic fixer-upper with historic character. Translation. It was barely standing and full of raccoon graffiti, but it was cheap, and more importantly, it was quiet. I wasn't here for social calls, homeowners' potlucks, or block parties themed around lawn perfection. I was here to heal my nerves and maybe grow some vegetables I wouldn't even eat. 3 weeks in, I was knee-deep in fence post replacements and had just managed to get the well pump to stop crying out like a demon each morning when the letter arrived. No knock at the door, no friendly face, just an envelope slapped on my gate like a scarlet letter. Green Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association. That's what the letterhead read, all faux elegant script like it had been printed at a wedding boutique. I wasn't part of any HOA. I'd made damn sure of that. I even had a conversation with the closing agent during escrow. I pointed to the parcel map and said, this little island of land, right here, no strings attached. Confirm it. She did. And yet here it was, a welcome letter from an HOA I had never joined, congratulating me on being a valued member of the Green Hollow Preserve community and letting me know that as the new owner of Parcel A12, I was responsible for maintaining compliance with community guidelines. The cherry on top, a line-item invoice demanding $18,700 in past dues, allegedly owed by the previous owner for road maintenance, communal landscaping, and something called pond preservation. Pond preservation? I had my own damn pond. For a moment, I wondered if it was just some clerical mix-up. Maybe they meant to send it to one of those new builds down the road where every house looked like it had been designed by someone with a fetish for vinyl siding. But no, the address was mine, the parcel number was mine, and the name at the bottom of the letter, Karen Danville, president of the HOA. The name was almost too on the nose, Karen. I walked inside, dropped the envelope on the kitchen table, and poured myself a cup of cold black coffee left over from the morning. The cup said, retired but still watching, a gag gift from a former colleague. Right now, it felt like a warning. I sat down and reread the letter. They claimed that my property had always been part of their HOA boundaries, despite it clearly being outside of the developed zone. There were even references to sections and bylaws that, upon quick search, had nothing to do with large agricultural parcels and everything to do with paint colors and mailbox heights. I picked up the phone and called the number listed. Straight to voicemail. I left a message. This is Lucas Merrill, owner of Parcel A12. I am not, have never been, and legally cannot be a part of Green Hollow Preserve. This letter is nonsense. Expect a formal response from me shortly. Then I drafted one. I pulled out the deed, scanned in my title documents, and wrote an official notice of non-compliance, not from me as a confused farmer, but as a former IRS agent trained in the art of putting bureaucratic fires out with gasoline. I asked for legal justification, boundary documentation, court records, and specific statutory authority, and I gave them 10 business days to respond before I initiated a public records request with the county. I mailed the letter via certified post, then leaned back and stared at the fields through my window. It was a sunny day, the kind that makes you think rural living might not be so bad. But something told me this was the first of many clouds to come. 2 days after I mailed my response, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee in one hand and a fencing staple in the other, ready to finish reinforcing the southeast corner of the pasture. The sun was barely up, the air smelled like dew and cedar, and for a moment, I actually forgot I was living inside the first act of a bureaucratic horror film. That moment lasted roughly 7 seconds, long enough to walk down my driveway and see the bright red sign hammered into the edge of my property. Violation notice. "This property is in breach of community regulations." The letters were bold, blocky, and bordered by a tasteful little HOA logo, a tree with a rope swing. Very whimsical, very intrusive. It was staked into the ground half a foot inside my fence line. My property. I took a breath through my teeth and crouched to inspect it. The signpost was freshly planted, the dirt still loose around the base, and attached to the nearby telephone pole, city property by the way, was a newly mounted motion detecting camera aimed directly at my front gate. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the little lens track me like a plastic eye. Then I laughed. Not a joyful laugh, more like the laugh a man lets out when he finds a scorpion in his boot and thinks, of course, why not? I walked back to the house, pulled up the contact sheet from the county property database, and dialed the local sheriff's department. I knew better than to call 911 for this, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to get some documentation started. A deputy arrived about 45 minutes later, all mustache and polite detachment. "Morning," he said as he stepped out of the cruiser, one thumb hooked on his belt. "Got a call about some kind of sign?" I pointed. "Right there. And while you're looking, take a peek at the camera they mounted on the pole. Not theirs. Not legal." He walked over, crouched, scratched his head, then let out the universal sigh of a civil servant who knows he's just stepped into an HOA land dispute. "You know," he said slowly, "I've seen them do this before. That's public right-of-way, technically, but you're right. It's close. And that camera shouldn't be there without city approval. Who do I talk to about having it removed?" He shrugged. "City Infrastructure Office, but it'll take weeks. You could file a complaint in writing, same with the sign. Might be trespassing, but a judge has to rule on that. This kind of thing tends to float in the gray zone." I could feel the heat rising in my ears. Gray zone, huh? "What about this?" I handed him a copy of the court ruling from 6 years ago. "This is a judgment from the Superior Court. HOA tried to annex this property and lost. It's on public record." The deputy flipped through the pages and raised his eyebrows. "Well now, that changes the flavor of things. You mind if I take a copy?" "Please. And I'd like to file an incident report for trespassing and unlawful posting on private property." He nodded. "We'll start a report. Might not go far without witnesses, but it builds a paper trail. That helps, especially if this escalates." I didn't say it out loud, but I had a sinking suspicion escalation was the entire HOA strategy. That afternoon, I drove into the county records office. The building was a low, tan slab of brick and quiet hostility. I took a number, sat beneath a ceiling fan that ticked like a metronome, and waited. When my number was finally called, I asked for an updated parcel map, zoning certification, and any filed easements related to parcel A12. The clerk, a woman who looked like she'd once fought a war with a stapler and lost, printed everything out for me. She handed it over like she was afraid it might bite her. "Everything in the system says your property is unitary and unrestricted," she said flatly. "No HOA ties, no liens, you're clear." I nodded. "Any record of a recent HOA boundary expansion?" She blinked. "Not officially. Though I've seen 3 different associations try that trick this year. File a redefinition map, slip it into their bylaws, then strong-arm the owners until someone caves or sues." "So it's a pattern?" She nodded once, like a slow metronome. "It's become a hobby for some of them." I thanked her and left with the documents under my arm. As I was backing out of the parking space, my phone buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize, presidentgreenhollowboard.org. It was from Karen Danville. She wrote, "Mr. Merrill, as you have now been formally informed, your refusal to comply with HOA regulations constitutes a breach of contractual agreement. Your dismissive tone in previous correspondence will be noted by our legal counsel. If the outstanding balance is not addressed within 15 days, we will proceed to file a lien and pursue enforcement through district court. Sincerely, Karen Danville Green Hollow Preserve HOA." There was a PDF attachment labeled HOA Boundary Revision enacted April 3rd. I opened it. It was a parcel map, a new one. And sure enough, some fresh lines had been drawn, curving around my property like a noose. But they'd made a mistake. The bottom left corner bore a small digital seal from the Office of Land Management. The trouble was that seal design hadn't been used in 2 years. The revision had a fake timestamp. That wasn't an amateur mistake. That was a forged public record. And they just sent it to a man who spent a decade auditing forged records for a living. I don't consider myself a vengeful man. I spent too many years watching people torpedo their own lives over petty slights to believe vengeance was anything but an energy sink. But forged maps? That was a different beast. Forgery wasn't petty, it was criminal. Especially when it involved municipal stamps and land boundaries. I printed out Karen's revised map and laid it beside the certified parcel diagram I'd gotten from the county clerk. They didn't just move the lines, they warped them. Like some HOA Picasso had decided my property should now be part of their little empire and bent reality to make it so. My farm, which sat proudly outside their borders for nearly a century, was now tucked inside their pastel-shaded Zone A12 like a wounded animal they meant to cage. The fake seal was the giveaway. The Office of Land Management updated their digital stamps after a data breach 2 years ago. The version on Karen's map had the old serif typeface and the obsolete QR tag. Rookie mistake, or just arrogance. I forwarded the document to my old friend Greg Langley, now a supervisor in the county's planning division. Greg was the kind of man who alphabetized his sock drawer and got anxious when people used the term plat interchangeably with parcel. A godsend in a land war like this. Greg called me back an hour later. "Lucas," he said in that flat tone of his that usually preceded trouble, "you're not going to like this." "Karen Danville forged a county map," I replied. "Pretty sure I'm already at capacity for not liking things," he exhaled. Her version was filed last week under a community boundary amendment. Problem is, it didn't go through official review. There's no hearing record, no assessor approval. But it's sitting in the subdirectory cache, like it got flagged as pending, not junk. So it's just floating there, unverified but visible? Exactly. Anyone pulling HOA zoning overlays might see that boundary and assume it's real, especially if they don't check it against the underlying property rolls. That's intentionally misleading. That's what it looks like, yeah. Can you get me a timestamp? "I can do better," he said. "Give me an hour." When Greg sent back the metadata, it included a document trail uploaded from an IP registered to Green Hollow Board's admin network, time-stamped 3 days after Karen's email and linked to an account registered under a J. Danville. Her husband, probably, a local real estate attorney with exactly enough knowledge to be dangerous. I took everything, screenshots, metadata, conflicting maps, and the real seal examples, and compiled it into a tidy PDF packet labeled Evidence, Unauthorized Map Alteration. Then I made a second call, this time to the County Legal Division. They picked up on the third ring. I asked to speak with their fraud liaison, explained my situation, and had a meeting booked within 24 hours. That night, while eating a dinner of canned chili and too many crackers, I noticed headlights coming up my long gravel drive. I killed the kitchen lights and stepped onto the porch in the dark. A black SUV coasted up and stopped near the barn. The driver's side window rolled down. "Mr. Merrill?" A woman's voice called. I stayed behind a pillar. "Depends who's asking." The woman stepped out, mid-40s, high-heeled boots entirely unsuited for a farm, clipboard in hand. Her hair was done to the level of aggression usually reserved for court hearings and promotional headshots. "I'm here on behalf of the Green Hollow Community Board," she said. "Just doing a visual check of boundary encroachments and compliance zones." "In the dark? Well, we did try to contact you, but you forged a boundary map and emailed it to me." She blinked. "Excuse me. I have the metadata. Your husband uploaded it from the board server. You're trying to annex land that doesn't belong to you and leverage it for backdated dues. That's not a compliance visit. That's trespassing." Her jaw stiffened. "This is a public relations effort. I'm here voluntarily." "Then you won't mind voluntarily getting off my land. Now." She stood there for a moment, eyes darting toward the barn like she was looking for backup. I stepped into the moonlight with a camera in hand, not recording yet, just making sure she saw it. She got back into her car without another word. The next morning, I visited the county legal office and handed over the packet. The fraud investigator, a man named Jenkins with a handshake like drywall, flipped through it with growing interest. "You said this was filed under HOA zoning authority?" I nodded. "Without public hearing, no cross-reference to parcel ownership, and with a forged stamp. This is actionable." "Good," I said, "because they've also threatened to place a lien on my property based on that garbage." Jenkins nodded and said they'd begin an internal review. If their findings matched mine, and they would, this wouldn't just be a zoning violation. It would be grounds for a formal complaint to the state's licensing board. I left the office and exhaled hard in the parking lot. I'd seen power grabs in my time. I'd even audited hedge fund execs who made Karen look like a toy poodle. But there was something especially greasy about a suburban HOA trying to rewrite land boundaries to claw a few $1,000s out of someone who just wanted to be left alone. And now they'd done it to the wrong man. I didn't expect things to go quiet. People like Karen don't go quiet. They just pause to reload. The camera near my gate was still there the next morning, the sign still flapping in the wind like a flag of HOA occupation. I'd filed the paperwork to have it removed through the city's infrastructure department, but that would take weeks. Bureaucracy's slow even when it wants to help, and no one in zoning wakes up excited to defend a guy being hunted by vinyl-sided suburbanites. That same day, I got a letter from the Environmental Protection Agency. Thin envelope, very official looking. Inside was a typed notice regarding an anonymous complaint filed against me for possible chemical runoff and pesticide seepage into a shared water source. I stared at the letter for a good 30 seconds before saying out loud to no one, "Oh, come the hell on. I didn't use pesticides. Not a drop." The pasture was still too neglected for me to even consider planting anything other than fence posts and bad intentions. But someone had taken the time to go online, fill out a federal form, and report me. And we both knew who. I called the EPA office listed on the letter, got transferred 3 times. Eventually spoke with a field inspector named Alicia, who sounded about as thrilled with the complaint as I was. "This happens a lot," she admitted after I explained my situation, not just with HOAs. Sometimes it's neighbors feuding over trees. Sometimes it's ex-spouses. But we're required to investigate. "I understand," I said. "I just want to make this painless for both of us." We scheduled a site visit for Thursday. I spent the next 2 days collecting everything I had. Water quality reports from the old owner, the receipt for my brand new septic inspection, even photos from my security cams showing no chemicals, no barrels, no nothing. When Alicia arrived, she took one look at the place and blinked like she'd expected something out of Breaking Bad, and instead got retired man slowly losing his patience with grass. She ran a few tests, walked the perimeter, and finally said, "You're clean." Whoever filed this, either they lied or they don't understand what pesticide runoff looks like. Oh, I think they understand. They just hoped the paperwork would scare me. She smirked and handed me a copy of the report. "We'll close this complaint, but keep this, just in case they try again." I added it to my growing folder titled Evidence of Karen's Bullshit. The next morning, the drama continued with a new delivery. This time it was a glossy newsletter, folded and stuffed into every mailbox up and down the county road. I found mine halfway buried in the weeds, fluttering like propaganda caught in retreat. Green Hollow Gazette, Issue 1. The front page had a fake earnest headline, "Concern raised over unregulated use of pesticides and unauthorized water access on farm parcel A12. Underneath was a stock photo of a sad duck. I kid you not. A mallard staring dramatically into the middle distance like it just found out its pond had a restraining order. The article described me as a private landowner with unclear intentions and a history of non-compliance, and claimed community health concerns were being escalated to relevant authorities. There were no names attached, just a vague editor Green Hollow board. But the message was clear. This was war by whisper, sabotage through printing press. I drove into town, parked in front of a local cafe, and waited. Sure enough, Karen showed up. She always did on Fridays, probably to harass the baristas about compostable lids. She saw me before I saw her, but I waved anyway and stood. "Good morning, Karen," I said loud enough that half the patio turned to look. "I love the newsletter. You ever think about publishing fiction professionally?" Her smile was brittle. "I have no idea what you're referring to." I held up the EPA clearance letter. "This says I'm clean. You want to tell the ducks, or should I?" She turned pink at the ears, but kept the fake smile. "We are a concerned community, Lucas. If you weren't so combative, you might find we're quite reasonable." "You forged a map." She blinked hard once. "I did no such thing." "Well, someone did, and the county's looking into it. I'm sure they'll be interested in your newsletter, too. Slander's an expensive hobby." Her mouth opened like she had a rehearsed line ready, but then she thought better of it. Instead, she turned and walked stiffly back to her car. The tail of her blouse fluttered behind her like a white flag she didn't know she was waving. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. That night, I printed 50 copies of the EPA report and pinned one to every mailbox where that newsletter had been stuffed. Then I added a small note. When your HOA lies, we all pay for the cleanup. Literally, the wind was picking up, and I swear I could hear ducks laughing in the distance. I woke up to shouting. It was just past 6, the sun still working up the nerve to rise, and someone was yelling near the far edge of my pasture. I threw on boots and grabbed my jacket, heart already drumming like it knew something wasn't right. By the time I got to the gate, I saw 2 men in neon yellow vests standing near the corner post of my fence, one holding a pair of bolt cutters, the other with a measuring wheel. The fence had been cut, clean through. "Hey!" I barked, striding up fast. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The man with the cutters looked up, annoyed, like I was interrupting a sacred ritual. "Green Hollow HOA," he said. "We're reclaiming access to the trail that runs through this boundary. Should have been public easement. This is private property." He shrugged. "According to our records, this area was always considered part of Zone A12. There's a maintenance path that needs to be kept open. Your records are fake. This fence has been here for 20 years. That gate wasn't access. It was livestock control." "Sir," the other one cut in, "we're just following the directive issued by the board. You'll have to take it up with them." "I already am." I took a picture of them. Then the bolt cutters. Then the hole in my fence. They didn't like that. The first one muttered something under his breath and walked back toward a utility truck idling nearby with the HOA logo crudely magnetized onto the side. I followed, got the license plate too. That same morning, I filed a police report for destruction of property. This time, I didn't just hand over documents. I brought printed photos, security cam timestamps, and a notarized affidavit showing the fence line hadn't changed in decades. The deputy, same guy as before, looked genuinely apologetic. "They're pushing it," he said, flipping through the folder. "But unless you catch a mid-cut, it'll stay a civil matter." That's the second time they've crossed the line, literally. "I'll log the report," he said. "Maybe talk to the DA's office, see if they'll take a look." Later that afternoon, things got worse. I was doing repairs on the barn roof when I heard the unmistakable buzzing of a drone. I climbed down, followed the sound, and saw it hovering low over the pond, then veering toward my house. I waved at it. It kept filming. I grabbed a pair of binoculars and traced its flight path back to a black pickup parked along the tree line outside my property, barely legal distance. Standing next to it was one of the same men from the morning. I didn't call the cops this time. I simply took out my own drone, launched it into the air, and let it trail theirs. Once I had the footage, I traced the license plate on the truck with a little help from Greg, my guy in zoning. The plate came back to a property manager affiliated with the HOA board. Same last name as Karen. Small world, or rather small cartel. I called my lawyer. Not a flashy guy, mostly dealt with water rights and estate disputes, but he knew his way around property law like a mechanic knows loose bolts. We drafted 3 letters. One to the HOA, demanding cessation of trespass, surveillance, and property interference. One to the county, requesting immediate recognition of ongoing harassment under the Landowner Protection Act. And one to the Sheriff's Department, demanding formal investigation into repeated incidents of criminal trespass and attempted intimidation. Then we filed a preliminary restraining petition against members of the HOA Executive Board, specifically naming Karen and her flying monkey relatives. The next evening, I installed motion sensor floodlights across the east and south pastures. I upgraded the cameras to thermal, infrared, and layered them into a cloud server. If they wanted a Cold War, I'd give them one. And then came the cherry on top, a certified letter from the HOA's lawyer informing me that my non-cooperative behavior and refusal to participate in community engagement may subject me to ongoing fines. It closed with a line that would have been funny if it wasn't so sociopathic. This matter could be resolved amicably if you simply aligned with the community's shared vision. Their vision apparently involved drones, bolt cutters, forged maps, and sad ducks. So I sent them a vision of my own. I posted a 12-foot wooden sign by the fence where they'd cut through. Private property. Trespassers will be photographed, identified, and sued. And below it, a little handmade plaque. Smile. Your HOA just lost its plausible deniability. I knew they'd retaliate, You don't put a sign like that on your fence and expect the enemy to throw in the towel. What I didn't expect was a sudden visit from Child Protective Services. It started with a knock. Too polite to be the sheriff, too firm to be a neighbor. I opened the door to find a woman in a beige windbreaker, badge clipped to her lapel, notepad in hand. "Mr. Merrill, I'm with Cumberland County Social Services. We received an anonymous report about unsafe living conditions here." I stared at her, then I laughed. "Ma'am, I live alone." She blinked, caught off guard. There was mention of a minor on the premises, possibly being exposed to dangerous chemicals and unsanitary conditions. "Well," I said, stepping aside with a wave, "unless you think my tractor counts as a dependent, you've been lied to." She walked through the house. I followed, keeping my tone civil, but every cell in my body buzzed with rage. She checked the pantry, the bathroom, took notes on the state of my floors, asked if I owned any firearms. "Locked up," I said. "I'm not new to paperwork." She asked to see the back acreage. I gave her a ride on the ATV. She asked if I'd had any recent disputes with neighbors. I told her the truth, straight up. By the end of the visit, she looked exhausted. "This happens more than it should," she admitted. "Weaponized bureaucracy. People file complaints just to harass. I'm sorry for the trouble." I handed her a copy of the EPA report. "You might want to check this against the anonymous complaint. See if there's a pattern." She nodded and promised to file a report dismissing the claim. Still, it stuck with me. The sheer audacity. I could handle legal threats, broken fences, even drones. But weaponizing child welfare laws, that was a new level of low. The next morning, I woke up to find 3 of my mailboxes smashed in, mine included. The sheriff came out again, took more photos, nodded solemnly. "I can post a patrol out here once in a while," he said. "But if they're determined, they'll just wait till we're gone." "They're getting desperate," I muttered. He looked at me. "You know you could just join the HOA, right? Play nice until it dies down." I looked at him the same way I once looked at a hedge fund manager who tried to deduct a yacht by listing it as client transportation. I'd rather staple my eyelids shut. That night, I held a Zoom call with my lawyer, Greg from zoning, and a contact of mine at the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. We mapped everything, every violation, every incident, every false report, and one detail caught our attention. Turns out the trail easement they kept citing didn't exist in the original deed, but it did appear in a suspicious revised plat submitted 2 months ago, one with no public record of approval. "That's document fraud," my lawyer said. "If we can prove the HOA board submitted altered documents to support their enforcement attempts, we can hit them with a civil RICO suit," I said, smiling. "Pattern of intimidation, fraud, and misuse of official process." My lawyer leaned back. "It's aggressive. So are bolt cutters and drones." We got to work. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for every plat change submitted by Green Hollow over the past 5 years. Greg started cross-checking parcel numbers. The Real Estate Commission began compiling complaints from other landowners. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been on their radar. I was just the one who refused to flinch. Then I got the email I didn't know I'd been waiting for. An anonymous tip. No name, no subject line, just a message. "Karen's nephew is on the board of county assessors. He altered the parcel overlays last spring. Check the approval logs for April 14th. It was specific, too specific to ignore. I forwarded it to Greg. An hour later, he confirmed it. The approval log had a change to the A12 boundary signed off by a JD. Karen's nephew, James Danville, junior assessor. Greg's voice was tight when he called me back. "Lucas, they're not just harassing you. They're orchestrating this like a machine. Every document ties back to the same 3 names." That's all I needed to hear. The next morning, I filed formal complaints against Karen, her nephew, and the board president with the state attorney general's office and the North Carolina Department of Insurance, which oversees HOA compliance statewide. This wasn't a land dispute anymore. It was a conspiracy. And I was done playing defense. By the time the state opened an inquiry, Karen had already started to sweat. Not that she showed it publicly. In the HOA meetings, now recorded thanks to a sneaky neighbor with a grudge and a decent phone mic, she still put on her Stepford wife smile and delivered lines like, "This is about community integrity," and "We just want what's best for the neighborhood." But behind that smile, cracks were forming. You could hear it in the way she barked at the secretary when she misread a bylaw, or how her voice trembled ever so slightly when someone brought up my name. Because the complaints I filed, they were working. The Attorney General's office responded first. They assigned an investigator to the case, someone from Raleigh named Marcus Liu, former prosecutor, known for being allergic to bullshit and particularly fond of HOA corruption cases. He called me personally to schedule an interview and asked if I could provide a comprehensive package of documentation. "Oh, Marcus," I said, "you're going to love what I've got." I prepared a binder thicker than a Waffle House menu. Inside, copies of the original deed, the fraudulent map overlays, notarized records from the prior owner's court case against the HOA, the EPA clearance, the CPS dismissal report, drone footage, photos of the fence sabotage, even a voice memo from the neighbor who overheard Karen ranting about that smug federal bastard who thinks he's smarter than us. Spoiler alert, I am smarter than them. Marcus read through it all. His tone didn't change much, but I could hear the weight shifting. "This isn't just harassment," he said. "It's a pattern of coordinated deception. You said the nephew's name was James Danville? That's him. Junior assessor, last seen falsifying county plats for his aunt's neighborhood mafia." He chuckled once, short and dry. "You may want to sit tight. This could get interesting fast." That same week, I received something glorious in my inbox. A scanned notice from the Real Estate Commission confirming that Karen's real estate license, yes, she had one, had been suspended pending investigation. Apparently, altering boundary lines to exert control over land she didn't own violated just a few codes of professional conduct. Karen responded the way any megalomaniac would. She doubled down. The HOA issued a public letter claiming I was interfering in community governance and that bad actors with extremist anti-community beliefs were threatening the stability of Green Hollow. They posted the letter at the mail kiosk, emailed it to all residents, and, my personal favorite, tried to run it as a full-page ad in the local newspaper. The newspaper declined. Instead, they ran a front-page story titled, "HOA in Hot Water. State opens probe into Green Hollow allegations." The photo below showed Karen looking like a raccoon caught in a flashlight beam. I didn't even plant the article. It came from a local journalist who'd gotten wind of the investigation through a tip at the courthouse. Apparently, Karen had been screaming at a clerk over why her community contribution forms weren't being processed faster. That little meltdown made it into the article too. By now, the neighborhood was fracturing. Half the board wanted to distance themselves from Karen. The other half just didn't want to go down with her. People who had once nodded along to her backyard gossip were suddenly whispering to me at the grocery store. "Between you and me, I never liked the pond fees. Karen said you were trespassing, but I knew something was off." One guy even dropped off a manila envelope on my porch labeled, "You didn't get this from me." Inside were copies of internal HOA memos, board emails, and one handwritten note that simply read, "Just change the lines. He'll crack eventually. They were hoping to break me." Instead, they handed me a loaded weapon. I turned it all over to Marcus. Then I filed civil lawsuits against the HOA, Karen personally, and the assessor's office, citing fraud, defamation, conspiracy to deprive rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We served Karen the papers during a board meeting, on camera. Her reaction? She stood up, knocked over a chair, and screamed, "He's not even part of our community." To which I responded, "Neither's your moral compass," and I left, smiling. The week after Karen got served felt quieter. Not peaceful, just quiet, like the woods before a storm. The HOA had gone dark. No newsletters, no fines, no lawn violation notes. The Facebook group went private. The gossip dried up. Karen stopped walking her ridiculous bichon frisé around the cul-de-sac like she was inspecting troops. But quiet doesn't mean safe. On Tuesday morning, I received a new letter, this one from a law firm representing the HOA. Not the usual team. They'd apparently fired their regular counsel. This one was a downtown outfit from Charlotte, all sharp corners and billable hours. They were offering to mediate, using language so condescending it felt like they were writing to a toddler with a crayon collection. They wanted me to drop the lawsuit, retract my damaging statements, and re-engage with the community in a spirit of mutual understanding. In return, they offered to waive all past dues and even remove the lien they never legally had a right to file. It was a confession in corporate wrapping paper. I didn't even respond. I forwarded it to Marcus, then handed it to my lawyer, who laughed out loud and said, This is what desperation smells like when it wears expensive cologne. The next day, a county zoning inspector showed up. Again. Same man from early spring, only now he looked sheepish. Mr. Merrill, he started, avoiding eye contact. We received a noise complaint about your equipment being operated after hours. You mean the tractor? He nodded. I haven't used it past 6 p.m. all week. He sighed. I know. I reviewed your footage. This came from someone on the HOA board. I'm obligated to log the visit, but between you and me, this is getting ridiculous. It passed ridiculous 2 counties ago. He left without writing me up, but the message was clear. They were still trying, still scratching at the bottom of the barrel, hoping for something, anything that might discredit me. So I gave them something. That weekend, I hosted an event I called Past Due Picnic. It wasn't on HOA property. It wasn't a protest. Just a friendly community barbecue on my farm with pulled pork, live music, lemonade, and one giant hand-painted sign that read, "This land is not your liability." Dozens came, people I'd never spoken to, folks who lived on the edge of the HOA lines and were fed up with the dues, the surveillance, the endless drama. A few even shared their own horror stories. One couple had been fined for planting non-regulation daffodils. They handed me written statements, offered to testify. Some even sent me screenshots of HOA group chats, where Karen referred to me as a cancer that must be excised. I printed those out, every last one, and I handed them to my lawyer with a quiet, "Merry Christmas." By Monday, things started unraveling fast. The County Ethics Board opened a review of James Danville, Karen's nephew. His name had shown up on multiple boundary adjustments, including areas now under separate lawsuits. One of the newer board members from Green Hollow resigned due to irreconcilable differences. 3 homeowners sent public notices withdrawing from the HOA entirely. Karen, meanwhile, had started lawyering up hard. Rumor was she'd mortgaged her house to cover retainer fees. At night, I'd stand on my porch and sip coffee, watching her house from a safe distance. Lights on all hours, cars coming and going, voices raised. One night, I swear I saw her pacing the driveway with a cordless phone and a bottle of Chardonnay, like she was summoning spirits of the dead. The machine was cracking, but I knew better than to assume it was over. No, this wasn't the end. This was the part where the Empire, battered and leaking, made one last desperate grab to control the narrative, and I was going to make damn sure they failed. Court day arrived with the kind of sharp, biting cold that makes your bones question their loyalty. I wore my best suit, charcoal gray, pressed shirt, no tie. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to bury. The courthouse was a squat brick building with flickering fluorescent lights and vending machines that hadn't been stocked since the Obama administration. But justice doesn't care about ambiance. It cares about evidence. The courtroom was packed. Locals had shown up like it was a high school football game. Karen sat at the defense table, stiff as a board, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Her eyes locked on mine once. I smiled. She didn't. We weren't just there over the lien anymore. That was the pebble that caused the avalanche. The judge had agreed to consolidate 3 civil suits, 1 for fraud, 1 for defamation, and 1 for civil conspiracy. The state's investigation was separate, but Marcus Liu sat quietly in the back row, arms folded, eyes scanning the room like a hawk in a suit. My lawyer opened clean and cold. He walked the judge through the original plat maps, then the fraudulent, revised versions. He pointed out the forged approval logs. He submitted the email chain from Karen's HOA account, where she coordinated boundary adjustments with her nephew James. "Your Honor," he said, flipping to the next tab, "this isn't a zoning misunderstanding. It's a calculated attempt to assert jurisdiction over land that the HOA has no legal authority to govern. My client purchased this property as a freehold, fully outside the HOA's boundaries. These documents, these falsified maps, are nothing less than instrumental fraud." The judge nodded once, barely blinked. Karen's lawyer tried the tired old tactic. My client acted in good faith. The boundary changes were filed through proper channels. Any errors were bureaucratic in nature. Then came the surprise. My side called a witness, Greg, the zoning office contact. He took the stand and explained that the plat changes hadn't just been irregular, they'd bypassed 3 levels of procedural oversight, and the only person who signed off was James Danville. We submitted a forensic analysis of the approval logs. It showed timestamps that didn't match up with the county database. We had screenshots, we had Greg's sworn affidavit, and then we played the audio recording. It wasn't flashy, just Karen during a HOA board meeting saying, "He'll give up once he realizes we control the map. We just redraw the lines, apply pressure, and he'll fold like the last guy." The courtroom went silent. Then someone in the back muttered, "Damn." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of gray. Her lawyer objected. The judge overruled him. "Continue," he said. We did. We brought up the CPS complaint, the EPA allegation, the mailbox vandalism, the drone footage, the emails about the past due scare tactic, each piece stacked like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb. By the time we reached closing statements, Karen wasn't even making eye contact with her attorneys. The judge recessed for lunch. When we came back, he didn't waste time. "In my 32 years on the bench, I've seen my share of community disputes," he said. "But this isn't about community. This is about power, about abuse of authority, about one organization and one individual in particular who believed they were above the law." He found in my favor on all counts. Damages awarded, $280,000, plus legal fees, plus an order to permanently remove all HOA claims or encumbrances on my property. Karen was visibly shaking when the judge finished. But it wasn't over. Because as we exited the courtroom, two plainclothes state investigators stepped forward and quietly read Karen her rights. She didn't even resist. She just looked past them, eyes glassy, like her brain had finally caught up to reality. I watched as she was escorted out the front doors in handcuffs. One camera crew caught it. The clip would go viral within the week. 3 months later, the mailbox was still crooked. I could have fixed it, but part of me liked it that way. A little scar. A reminder that no matter how clean the field looks now, there was once a battle here. A stupid petty bureaucratic war over imaginary lines and invented debts. And I won. Karen ended up taking a plea deal. Fraud, abuse of position, tampering with public records. The big charges got shaved down, but she still got 18 months probation, a 5-figure fine, and her real estate license permanently revoked. Her nephew James lost his job and is now under state review for perjury. Green Hollow HOA dissolved. Turns out, when you lose 3 lawsuits, have your president arrested, and your budget shredded by settlements and fines, the volunteers start quitting. Fast. By spring, a notice went out. The Green Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association will cease operations effective immediately. It was signed by a shaky interim chair who looked like she hadn't slept in a month. The office building? Empty. I bought it at auction. It was dirt cheap. Moldy drywall, bad plumbing, a little bit of asbestos for extra flavor. I didn't care. I tore down the signage, gutted the inside, and turned it into a co-op farm store for local growers. We sell eggs, raw milk, firewood, you name it. No HOA fees. And once a year, we host a little event. Past due BBQ. We put out a banner on the old Green Hollow entrance, hang string lights, smoke brisket until dawn. Local musicians play under the stars. The neighbors come with lawn chairs, kids with glow sticks, older couples who used to whisper about their fines now laughing freely. And there's one spot, just past the hay bales, where I put up a metal sign. Clean font, painted matte black. It reads, "This land isn't part of your fantasy, it's mine." People always ask if I regret buying this farm. I don't. I left the IRS because I was tired of fighting for a system I didn't believe in. But here, on this land, in this town, with these people, I didn't just fight back. I reclaimed something. My peace, my land, my name. They thought I'd roll over, that I'd pay the dues, shut my mouth, and play nice. They forgot who I was. I don't play nice. I play fair. And when fair doesn't work, I play smart.